King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, LW. I bought this album because in my search for something different, I'd started researching microtonal music, and I found some very interesting music made by a 20th century American composer called Harry Partch, who was an influence on Tom Waits. And I found a lot of videos of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. And this album was on special offer at HMV in High Wycombe. It was about £6 and it should have been about £11. In Western music there are 8 tones that make up an octave. If you make music using the notes of the octave playing against the chords that are made up from combinations of these notes, it will always sound pleasing to the ear, though perhaps a bit boring. This is called diatonic. The notes are arranged in groups of 3 notes and then a semitone, then 2 notes, then a semitone. You can change the flavour of the music by changing the order of the tones and semitones to create modes. You can also add colour by adding the semitones that are not part of the octave, the chromatic tones. But our ears have become used to all kinds of dissonances created by going beyond the diatonic, most notably jazz and blues, but also modern classical music. Back in the 60s, people started experimenting with microtones, most famously George Harrison with his use of the sitar. There are plenty of Western instruments capable of playing microtones. Strings like violin, viola and cello, upright bass, trombone and slide guitar. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard are an Australian rock band who have made a large number of albums. They are to my ear fairly interesting yet quite unremarkable. But they have made 4 albums of microtonal rock music. They have had special guitars made with areas of the fretboard having frets between the usual frets. Often they use this to give an electric sitar effect to the lead lines, creating rock music that sounds a bit like 4U2, one of the Harrison songs on Revolver. I'm quite a fan of that song and I find it refreshing to hear this music. The album opens with a distorted microtonal Dick Dale surf rock type intro leading into a bit of Blockhead's sex and drugs and rock and roll type funk. Then we get a track that sounds like it features gamelan bells, and this does actually sound a bit like Harry Partch. They also compose riffs in microtones, with a number of instruments all playing complex arrangements. The rhythm to these tracks tends to stay in common time, with a bit of the pulse of techno, with just the beats and the snare rolls, but the overall sound is a bit like the 70s psychedelic music of bands like Gong and Steve Hillage. What King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard have achieved is adding a slightly more Eastern sound to distorted rock guitars, and interesting note combinations that catch your attention with their unfamiliarity. What they don't seem to have done is find the lost chord. LW, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.